A Supreme Court ruling just dropped 9-0 and it is about to change everything you thought you knew about driving with a firearm. If you own a gun and drive a car, this affects you directly. Subscribe now so rulings like this never catch you off guard again. Overview of the Supreme Court 90 decision. The Supreme Court does not agree on much these days. In fact, most major decisions are split 5-4, sometimes 6-3. A 9-0 ruling is extremely rare. It has only happened a handful of times in recent history on issues this big. Here is what happened. A driver was transporting a legally owned firearm across state lines. He followed what he believed were the rules. He was calm, cooperative, and honest with the officer, but he was still arrested because the state he was driving through had its own transport laws that conflicted with federal rules. The lower court sided with the state. Then the Supreme Court stepped in and said, no. All 9 justices agreed that states cannot punish drivers for transporting firearms that meet federal standards between 2 places where the gun is legally owned. That is a massive statement. 9 voices, 0 disagreement. But here is something most people do not know about how this case actually got to the Supreme Court, and it will surprise you. Constitutional questions at the center of the case. 2 of America's most important rights were directly clashing in this case: the Second Amendment, your right to own a gun, and the Firearm Owners Protection Act of 1986, a federal law specifically written to let gun owners travel between states without being arrested. That 1986 law, was passed because the problem was already serious back then. Gun owners were being stopped and charged, in states they were simply passing through. Congress said enough. They wrote a federal protection. But here is the shocking part. Even after that law passed, states like New Jersey continued arresting out-of-state drivers for transport violations. Between 2005 and 2015, New Jersey alone prosecuted hundreds of out-of-state gun owners who believed they were federally protected. The Constitution said one thing, certain states were doing another, and the courts kept allowing it until now. So, the big question became, can a state law override a federal protection? And the answer the Supreme Court gave was loud and clear. But what does this ruling actually change on the ground for someone driving with a firearm? That is where it gets very real. How the ruling redefines as firearm transport in vehicles. This ruling sets a very specific new standard and it only protects you if you follow 4 clear rules. 1. Your starting point and your destination must both be places where your gun ownership is legal. 2. The gun must be unloaded. 3. It must be locked in a hard case and stored in the trunk or rear cargo area. 4. Any stops must be necessary stops only. Fuel, emergencies, rest. Here is a number that puts this in perspective. Over 40 million Americans transport firearms in vehicles every single year. That includes hunters, competitive shooters, people relocating, and everyday carriers. Before this ruling, simply driving through the wrong state could turn a legal trip into a felony arrest. Even if the driver did everything right. This ruling draws the clearest line yet between legal transport and criminal possession in a moving vehicle. But knowing the rule and actually being safe on the road are 2 different things. And most drivers are missing one critical piece of this puzzle. Have you ever been stopped while transporting a firearm? Drop your experience in the comments. We read every single one. Effects on state and local gun transport laws. Some states, have spent decades building transport laws so complicated that even lawyers got confused, by them. New York, New Jersey, Maryland, and California had requirements that directly, conflicted with federal FOPA standards, and lower courts kept letting them enforce those laws. Anyway, here is a data point that tells the whole story. A 2019 study found that law-abiding gun owners in transit states faced arrest rates nearly 3 times, higher than in states that followed federal transport standards, 3 times higher for doing something federally protected. This ruling, tells those states directly, your local rules cannot be used as a trap for compliant drivers, simply passing through. But, and this is important, state laws are not gone. States can still regulate how firearms are stored within their borders. What they cannot, do is use those regulations to arrest someone who is following federal rules. The line is clearer now, but you still need to know where that line is, especially when an officer is standing at your window. Implications for law enforcement and traffic stops. Here is the practical truth about what this means when those red and blue lights appear in your mirror. Before this ruling, officers in restrictive states could use the simple presence of a firearm as justification, to search your entire vehicle, no warrant, no crime, just the gun itself. Music. This ruling says that it is no longer legal on its own. Illegally, music, transported firearm does not automatically equal probable cause for a search, but here is something important to understand. Music. As of 2023, only about 35% of police departments in the United States had updated their vehicle search, music, training within the previous 2 years. That means a large number of officers are still operating on older standards. The law has changed. Behavior on the street takes longer to catch up. You cannot assume every officer knows this ruling. Music exists. That means how you behave in that moment, what you say, what you do, how calm. Music, you are matters just as much as the ruling itself, and the people who have the loudest opinions about this ruling, they might surprise you. Reactions. Music, from gun rights and gun control advocates. The response to this ruling split immediately. Music, but not entirely the way you might expect. Gun rights groups called it a generational victory. Music, their argument is simple. Since FOPA passed in 1986, over 300 documented cases involved law-abiding gun owners arrested in transit states despite following federal rules. This ruling, they say, finally makes that protection real. Gun control advocates, music, pushed back. Their concern is that loosening transport enforcement makes it easier for firearms to move across state lines, music, without oversight, and that creates risk. But here is the part that even surprised legal analysts. Music, several attorneys and scholars who strongly support stricter gun laws publicly admitted the constitutional logic of this ruling was sound. Music, when all 9 justices, including the most progressive voices on the court, agree, the legal foundation is hard to argue with. Music, both sides agree on one thing, though. This decision will be tested in courts across, music, the country for years to come. And that brings us to the most important question of all. What does this mean for you, music? Personally, the next time you drive with a firearm, do you think this ruling goes far enough, or does it still leave too many gaps for gun, music, owners? Tell us what you think below. What drivers and firearm owners should know moving forward. This is the section that actually keeps you out of trouble. The ruling protects you, but only when you have already done your part. Music, here is exactly what that looks like. Before you leave home, unload the firearm completely, lock it in a hard-sided case, put it in your trunk or rear cargo area, store ammunition separately, then look up every state on your route and confirm your ownership is legal in both your starting point and your destination. Music, when you are stopped, stay calm, keep both hands on the steering wheel. If you need to disclose, say clearly, music, and slowly, "Officer, I have an unloaded firearm in a locked case in my trunk. I am traveling under federal safe passage." Music, protections. If the officer asks to search, say, "I do not consent to any," music, searches. No argument, no explanation, just calm and clear. If a search happens anyway, do not resist, say out loud that you do not consent, music, and write down every detail the moment the stop ends. According to a 2022 legal review, drivers who clearly stated non-consent during an unlawful search, music, were significantly more likely to have evidence suppressed in court. Your words in that moment are your first line of legal defense. Music, the Supreme Court just handed you one of the strongest legal protections for firearm transport in decades, but it only works if you know how to use it. Share this video with every gun owner you know. Subscribe for more breakdowns like this, music, and drop your thoughts in the comments below.